Well, welcome to another Friday deep dive here on the Mandate. It's our favorite day of the week, and here we're going to talk about some really relevant stuff by going way back to the past with none other than Victor Davis Hanson. Civilizations rise and fall, but very few are completely obliterated. And here to explain is Victor himself.
Thank you.
So tell us about the end of everything.
Well, you made a good point that usually wars don't end in the annihilation of a population, a physical space, their language, culture, traditions, that they're wiped out of memory, but it does happen. And I looked at four sort of iconic cases: ancient Thebes and ancient Greece, the destruction of Carthage by the Romans, the destruction of Constantinople, and the end of the Byzantines by Mehmet and the Islamic Ottomans, and then the destruction of Tenochtitlan by Cortez, and the end of the Aztec culture and language. And I tried to find out why it happened that was so unusual, and I came up with certain commonalities, that these societies were in a decline financially, economically, militarily, and they weren't really aware of it given their past preeminence. And so they were sort of naive about their ability to withstand challenges from new upstart aggressors. They also they relied on allies that they thought would help them, and the allies usually made a calculated decision to not help them when they found out they would probably lose. They had no idea about the caliber of Alexander the Great that destroyed Thebes, or Scipio who destroyed Carthage, or Cortez. It was their unfortunate experience to be up against some of the most ruthless and gifted military commanders in history. I could go on, but anyway, I had a typology of why this happened, and then the epilogue tries to suggest that it can happen again if a society is not careful and it lives on its past glory, or it underestimates the nature of its enemies and the ability of its enemies, or it counts on somebody to help them when they should be seeking self-reliance.
Now, Victor, as you know, I mean, we all know every human being alive in the West is affected in some way by this idea of history and science for the last at least 150 years in America, right? That dominates the universities. This idea that we're constantly progressing on. Quite the contrary. There couldn't be an end of everything, because the arc of history, right, bends towards whatever Barack Obama wants. So this is not just the language that we use. It really is deeply, I think, embedded in the citizenry throughout the West, or at least the elites, that you can't have an end to everything. Things are progressing, and science is helping us, and we're moving forward. So, I mean, how do you counter that? I mean, this book, in a way, the end of everything is sort of a challenge that, look, this could happen, but a lot of people they don't want to hear that, and plus they believe in something that's almost the opposite, right?
Yeah, I think that the common denominator here is human nature does not change. It's sort of like water. Water never changes, but the delivery system, whether it's an old handheld pump or a sophisticated turbine pump, can radically affect the velocity. But you don't think that a pump that pumps 7,000 gallons a minute versus one that has 3 gallons a minute, you don't think that the water is any different. And that's what human nature is. But the delivery system, science, is very different. So we confuse this, especially the modern age. We feel that because we can call somebody up in the Congo on our iPhone, or we can get the world's knowledge at our fingertips by a Google search, and therefore that we have evolved morally, intellectually, psychologically, in a way, and that we have changed human nature, but we haven't. And that's not under dispute. If you look at the 20th century, more people were killed in the sophisticated 20th century than all centuries combined in wars. I mean, Mao Zedong killed over 70 million. Joseph Stalin killed 20 million. 65 to 70 million were killed in World War II, probably 25 million in World War I. So this dwarfed Alexander the Great, Caesar. It dwarfed the Spanish Empire, the 30 Years' War, 7 Years' War, Napoleonic Wars, because of science had evolved, but it has nothing to do with morality or wisdom. That's innate to humans. And you think that maybe the only chance for optimism is where while human nature stays static, they can look back at the past and there are the data of examples and reference grows. So people can say, we now know why wars start, how they progress, and how they end, and maybe we can prevent them. But at the same time we do that, and your point is that we have this sort of arrogance. So we know that wars start because of the lack of deterrence, that there's always evil people there, and they will always take advantage of a weak opponent, and we know how they end. But at the same time we have that aggregate wisdom of the ages, we also have another school of thought that feels, well, technology gets more sophisticated. Humans are getting bigger and stronger and healthier. Therefore, they have evolved. And now, if we just give us enough power, we can abolish war. We can have the International Criminal Court or the UN. We can make by fiat war obsolete or illegal. And of course, that's a very dangerous concept.
Yeah, terrifying to me. It feels as if if that really envelops you, you're flying blind and arrogantly. But let's talk about that. I mean, let's move at the end of everything. This idea that these factors can combine to lead to actually obliteration. Let's talk about America now and the kind of conflict that we see here within America. A big fan of a lot of the things you've been writing over the years in all respects. And I was thinking about this topic, and it made me think of Angelo Codevilla, late, great Angelo Codevilla, an essay that he wrote once.
He's a good friend of mine, yeah.
Yes. Sorely missed by myself and everyone at Claremont. But he wrote an essay about our revolution's logic. And he mentions Coursera and Thucydides. He described 2016 as a revolution against the ruling class, and that we were now engaged in a back and forth where recrimination and you basically were stuck in a spiral now where each side is going to fight until one of them wins. I don't know to what extent you agree with that, but how would you describe the conflict within the United States right now?
Well, I think why the left is melting down is that most past presidential candidates on the Republican side, and even presidents, I'm talking specifically about a Mitt Romney's campaign or John McCain or the two Bushes campaign, maybe Reagan was an exception, but the Bob Dole campaign, their attitude was that we're going to slow down the progressive agenda or the march through the institutions, but it's kind of faded since the FDR, and so we're going to modulate it, moderate it. And then Trump came along, and he said, you don't have to be a minority party. You can recapture the middle class through a nationalist-populist agenda, and that was be skeptical of globalization, try to invest in the American muscular classes, don't get into endless wars in the Middle East on the ground, develop all of your resources, et cetera, et cetera. And that was kind of at the first term, and he had a lot of successes, but I think in the wilderness years of the 4 years of the Biden administration, he learned a lot from that. So there are no Jim Mattises, there are no Rex Tillersons, there's no Bill Barrs, there's none of the Washington bipartisan John Bolton type elites. So what he did this time is he said, it's not enough to address the symptoms of the progressive project. You've got to go to the source. And the source, we know what it is. The source is they're trying to change the demography by massive illegal migration, 30 million illegal immigrants, 10,000 a day under Biden. They have captured the universities. They're not disinterested. They're sources of bias. The media like PBS, NPR are propagandistic. the corporate boardroom, foundations, etc. We need to start looking at the university's tax endowment, look at their surcharges. So what I'm getting at is this was a counter-revolution, and it's holistic, it's cultural, economic, financial, political. He's saying, we're going to look at classical architecture. We're going to go back and look at the air traffic controller test. Almost every aspect of what we thought was settled, the DEI, affirmative action, racial obsessions, critical legal theory, critical race theory, critical modern monetary theory, inflationary is printing money is not that bad. He's questioning. So this is a counter revolution. And it's very controversial because he's trying to wage it in 4 years, but specifically in 1 year. We're not even into the first year. And I think people are shocked at it because it's much harder to undo 4 years of what was a progressive revolution with just a year of counter-revolution. But it's addressing the symptoms of what manifests itself for the last 50 or 60 or maybe 80 years. And we'll see if he's going to be successful in 4 years and he can pass on that torch to somebody to continue it. But it's a very radical, ambitious, common sense, back to normality counter-revolution.
Let's talk about the vision between the sides, because this, I would put it this way. I mean, a year ago, right, if you and I were talking, at least on my side, I would feel very differently than I do right now, right? I think most people on the right, went through the doldrums and thought, we are in the depths of, we disagree about what citizenship is. We disagree about what the nation state is. We disagree about what men and women are. We disagree about the basic, fundamental aspects of human life. And you had to wonder, how do you keep something together when you have, a polis, you have a citizenry that's so divided on these fundamental issues? And it felt as if, everyone was being oppressed as a censorship regime. There was a lot of real active measures, right, taken by the left during that time, as you say. And that division's still there, right? But people on the right now feel as if, hey, we won, and Trump is obviously moving this counter-revolution forward. And yet the division is still there, and this counter-revolution, as you say, it's in a year is a short period of time, but it's moving forward. And right now, it looks like it's winning. It's winning culturally. It's winning in polls. It looks like there has been a large cultural and political shift. So, I mean, I guess a lot of people feel very optimistic right now. Do you share their optimism?
I think I'm older than you, but I remember the 1984 Apple commercial where a woman runs in with a hammer. Do you remember that? And she throws it into a Big Brother screen and it shatters it. And the idea was Apple has revolutionized the old IBM Nexus or something. And I think the left, because they had all of these institutional levers, the corporate boardroom, K through 12 academia, the foundations, popular culture, sports, of course, the media and the elite universities. Everybody thought that represented a consensus when it never did. It was a minority of the bicoastal elites thinking. They were in a minority, but it took somebody who basically came in like a Shane type character or Magnificent Seven, somebody out of a John Ford maybe, Western, who had a different set of skill, a Clint Eastwood or John Wayne, and they just basically said, you people are ossified, you're calcified, you don't know what to do, but I have some skill sets that can take on this burden, the proverbial banditos or cattle barons. But you're not going to like what I do because I have to, I tweet loudly and I don't care what people think of me. And I go tit for tat to anybody who attacks me. And I look garish and I'll do things, but I will solve the problem. And that's kind of what Trump is doing. He's kind of a tragic hero. And the dilemma is that when somebody is a gifted person like that and he starts to make change, he reaches a point where people can start to feel the change and appreciate it, and they get lax and they say, well, wow, did we really want to have him come in and wow, he tweets too much, but they don't want to accept that that type of modality was necessary given the nature of the opposition, and they bought into it. So what's you'll see Trump's popularity undulate depending on how many left-wing newscasts show ICE arresting somebody who's screaming on the ground without any context that he's a possible pedophile or a likely pedophile and shouldn't have been here at all and was deported 3 or 4 times. But by and large, Trump understood that he picks issues, the transgendered issue, the illegal immigration issue, the crime issue, deterrence abroad, where he knows that there's a 40-60 majority on his side. And he's very clever about that. When he took out the Iranian installations, almost immediately he said he wanted to make Iran great. They wanted to have a performance art celebratory attack on our facilities in Qatar. He said that's fine as long as you don't hurt one hair on an American head. And then he said they had to get out of their system. There's no longer war. So he understood the MAGA base, and he understood the need for deterrence, and he understood where the public was on each of those issues,
Mm-hmm.
and he adapted. I think he's very underrated as a politician, and that's part of the reasons that I cannot believe that he polls, depending on the left-wing polls, 43 to 45%, and on the conservative and actually more accurate in the 2024 polls, he's polling between 50 and 55.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is phenomenal given the magnitude of change that he's embarking on. But he's a very good politician. He knows where the middle class is on every issue, and that's the majority of America.